Hi, everyone. This is Sue Reynolds, and we're about to begin our webinar for our mechanical schools on goals. So I'm going to check the technology here, make sure everybody can hear us. So I'm trying to see. It looks like everybody is using voice over internet. Let me just unmute someone. Hopefully, it's someone that's got a mic in their computer as well. So let's see, Amy Snyder, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. And are you seeing the screen that says Steering Team Training 4, Prep for Council Meeting 3 on it? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so since Amy can see us, I'm assuming that everyone can, so that's a good thing. I'm going to get started right away because we have a lot to cover today. I do want to, we'll pause a minute and kind of hear from the 4 schools and kind of get an update on how your last meeting on your vision went. That's always, to me, that's always a real exciting meeting. But a couple of things before we get to that point. First of all, remember that the control panel has an arrow where you can make it smaller, and then if you hit that again, it'll make it larger. And it occurred to me, let me put in the slides that I'm using right now so that if you want to, you can print those. Let's see, we're coming down to, hang on here. These are in, where is it? Here it is. This is here. And I want to put in these slides. And put in one more slide here. And we'll put in the ones that I'm in right now. Which are those? Okay, so both of the PowerPoints that we're using today are uploading right now, and you'll be able to download those and print them if you want to. So, okay, then I'm going to hit the record button so that we can play this later if we want to. Good, so we're recording. Okay, so we're talking about getting ready for your next council meeting, which is on goals. And this is really one of the most important meetings because these goals will drive not only what you do in the school counseling program in your school, but as a Guiding All Kids school, next year when we start to implement your community-based guidance and your teacher advisor program, we're going to use the same goals. And the same thing the year after that when we're looking at your parent-based guidance initiative and your integration with the academic curriculum, we're going to come back to these same goals. So your goals in GAK not only drive your school counseling program, but they drive all 5 different programs. Everybody will be using the same student goals. So it's a really important step. It's also the first time we're going to pull data in and use data to help you make some decisions. So all the data that you've been collecting, we'll use a portion of that data here. Okay, couple of updates. First of all, we've had some questions about getting data into the online system, and it's important that we capture the data into our system so that later when we're developing these different programs, as well as now when we're developing your school counseling programs, that all the different leaders have access to the information in a way that will coordinate with the training that they're getting. So, for example, we ask you to put the vision statement in a certain way because later different leaders down the road are going to be accessing that, and we'll pull in different portions of the vision statement when we're looking at different sections in different steps. So it may seem like there's no rhyme or reason on how we're asking you to enter the data, but there is. So now let's say that you've got your vision statement, for example, in a Word doc. What most schools will do is they'll just cut and paste. They'll take the paragraph about the ideal students and they'll just cut and paste that into the ideal students box. So don't be afraid to cut and paste. I know when I'm entering this information, I like to do it first as a Word doc, and I use the spell check and all that stuff, and then I'll cut and paste into our online system. So, okay, wanted to mention that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is the percentage of students who have taken your survey. The rubric item for that is that you have surveyed 95% of your students. And we want you to understand why we're looking for 95%. This data that you're collecting is going to help you make decisions, but it's also going to become the baseline data for your goals. So when you go to develop goals this month, you'll see that once you identify a goal, your baseline data will already be in there, and it's coming from the survey. So the more accurate we can get that survey data, the better off we're going to be. The other thing is that when you've surveyed a high percentage of students, your council won't be able to say, well, maybe this wasn't really a random survey. If it comes out that 99% of your students are feeling stressed, and you've only surveyed 30 kids, your council could say, well, maybe just the 30 that they happen to select were stressed. So the higher you can get that percentage, the better off you're going to be. And I know that right now that's a lot of work and it's a pain in the rear end to, make sure you've got all those students in. But I think down the road, you'll be really happy that you went to that effort. Okay, so now let's say it's just impossible because you've had a million snow days. At the very, very least, we would like you to have at least 30 randomly selected students for each grade level, and they have to be random. So you've got to make sure that you didn't just select kids in second period, because it may be that those kids also were enrolled in band and band forced them to be in a second period English class. So you've really got to make sure that the kids are random if you're not surveying a large percentage. Surveying at least 30 kids per grade level will allow us to give you data, and statistically it will allow you to make conclusions of that data for grade levels. So you'll be able to see that our ninth graders didn't understand this concept, but our 12th graders did. So at least 30 per grade level. That would be the very minimum. We would really like you to go higher than that. The other problem with only surveying a small percentage of students in each grade level is that we have to have in our subgroups at least 10 students who have surveyed, or we can't report the data summary to you. So let's say that you're surveying just 30 ninth graders, but it just so happens that you don't have 10 free and reduced lunch kids within those 30 ninth graders. Well, then you're not going to be able to see what did the free and reduced ninth graders say. So the larger you can get that percentage, the more likely it is that your student groups are going to be represented. So again, that's one of the reasons why we want that percentage to be so high. So between now and our goals meeting with your council, if you can survey more students, that would be wonderful. If you aren't able to survey 95%, you'll get a comment from us that says, please revise, and it will give you things to think about, and it will say, after you've thought about all these things, if you still can't get above 30 per grade level, then just resubmit and we'll know that you tried. and then you'll get a meets criteria after that. But we want to kind of have a little conversation with you about, did you really try, and did you think about how this might hurt you in the future? And then if you confirm back to us, yes, we've thought about all those things and this is the best that we can do, then it's going to be okay, as long as you have 30 per grade level. So, okay, so wanted to talk about that. We know that with the snow days, especially in your area of the state, that this is impacting your ability to survey the kids. So, okay, I wanted to talk about that. I do want to just very quickly open up your mics and hear from each of the schools. And I think maybe the best way to do that is if somebody in each of the buildings can just raise your hand in the control panel, and then I'll unmute you, and you can just kind of give us just a real quick summary of how the visioning meeting went. I'm especially interested on what happened in the fourth part of the visioning discussion, where you talked about your school's data and the percentage of students that you visioned as being successful in however you report data out. Achievement data. So, okay, looking for hands to go up. I guess I could just call on people. So I'll start with Kim. Kim Bunn, can you tell us how the middle school's doing? And Kim, I think you're self-muted, so you'll need to unmute yourself there. Kim, there you go. We can hear you. Kim? That's weird. I know Kim unmuted herself. Well, Janet's got her hand up. Let's go up to Janet. Okay. Hi, Janet. So we're talking about the high school.
Yes. I feel like our meeting went well. We had a good attendance. Hold on. Our bell's going off currently.
Okay.
As far as data goes, we were not able to get our data complete, so we're still working on that.
Okay.
And compiling that. So the fourth portion of our
How did your attendance at your visioning meeting compare to the attendance at your first intro meeting?
Honestly, it was about the same.
Okay, good. And that discussion about, do we vision that 100% of the students are achieving academically, how did that go?
Well, we're plugging along and hoping that is going to continue.
Okay. So, so were you able, in your last meeting, were you able to work through that visioning discussion and come up with that fourth question about, where you listed all the achievement, the ways you measure achievement, and then you vision the percentage of students who met that benchmark?
Yeah, we really worked together to come up with all those. We just are, we were working with the shoot for the moon, and that's what we were going with since it was the vision.
Okay, perfect. And so there were no arguments or fights, or everybody kind of eventually went to that point. Okay, good.
No, because the vision that is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes schools get confused on that, and I always like to check in because it can get kind of dicey sometimes. But it sounds like that worked out fine with your school. Okay, good.
Honestly, we had fun with it.
You had some?
We had fun with that, yeah, just because it was,
good.
A dream.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, very good. Let's see who else we can hear from. Let me try Kim again. Kim at the middle school. Let me see if we can unmute you. Oops. I don't think that her. There we are. Kim, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. Yes. Quick update from the middle school.
Things went great. We went ahead. The thing that's interesting about our student achievement percentages is we're in the process of changing from regular report cards, I don't know what we call them, to standard-based report cards, and so that affected our percentages for that.
Oh, interesting. And did you come up?
We'll be going to 4s instead of A's. We'll be doing a 1, 2, 3, 4 on a standard-based report card.
Uh-huh.
And next, so that's just kind of a change for us.
Okay, so but were you still able to come up with the idea that all of the kids in your dreams, that all the kids would be successful?
Yes, we were. I mean, because 4 means mastery, so yes.
Okay, perfect. Good, good. And what was your attendance like compared to the first meeting?
It was really good.
Okay, good. So no drop off. That's a good sign. That's really, for all of you who are experiencing that, that's a really good sign that people felt like, one, that the work was good work, but two, that you were listening. Because if they felt like they just came and you talked at them, I don't think they would have been back to the second meeting. And if you did, there's lots of reasons why attendance might drop off, but that's one of them that we always want to consider. So that's good. Good. Okay. Let's talk to the other schools. So we're looking for Mechanical Elementary or Pipe Creek. So Elizabeth or Amy, let's check in with Amy here. So Amy, I've got you unmuted again. Do you want to give us a quick update about the elementary?
Well, Amy's voice changed a little bit today, so Amy had to step out. This is Mr. Fuel, assistant principal here at MacL.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm okay. So we're just looking for an update about how the second meeting for GAK went in your school when you were talking about visioning.
It went well. I mean, attendance was pretty consistent with what it's been. With the benchmarks, we based it upon our school improvement data that we've had in place.
Uh-huh. Good. And so, any hiccups with dreaming for 100% of the kids?
What's that again?
And were there any issues with having dreams for all of the kids 100%, or was that a pretty easy discussion for you?
Yeah, it was a really easy discussion for our group to establish our vision statement and the benchmarks that we had in place for that.
Okay, good. That's good to hear. Okay, anything else you want to add?
No, everything seems to be going well. We're plugging away on it.
Okay, sounds good. Very good. I'm going to mute you again, and then let's go to Elizabeth. So from Pipe Creek, and Elizabeth, I'll unmute you here. Elizabeth, can you hear us?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, perfect. So an update from your school.
I think that we would probably mirror MacL's statement pretty much. We on our goals, we took them from our school improvement plan, and because we don't have ISTEP data that necessarily drives us, our goals are reading on grade level and scoring in the top tiers of math assessments and everything, just for math knowledge. So we took those as our goals, and everyone seems to be on the right page, or on the same page, I should say, for the vision. So it's really pretty easy.
Okay, that sounds great. And your attendance was similar to the first meeting?
Yep, similar. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
and we've actually
wonderful.
added a couple more members, so that was nice too.
Good. So, and that brings up a good point too. If you are the council member recruitment point person on your steering team, it's always okay to be looking for new council members and to build that council out so it's as broad based as possible. So wonderful. Okay. That sounds good. We'll mute you again. Good reports. Kind of felt like after looking at the work that you're submitting, I kind of felt like everything was going fine, but I always kind of like to check in real quickly. So that was good to know. Okay, so let's go forward. So as I mentioned, today we're talking about goals. This is a much more technical discussion than the vision statement was. And again, we're going to pull in data. This is a meeting that there's a lot to cover in, and it's really important that you keep the things rolling. so that it doesn't turn into a 6-hour meeting. It could easily do that. So we really need to keep the agenda rolling on this one. So there is a pre-meeting mailing. We're going to ask the council members to look at some possible goals before they get to the meeting, and that will speed your meeting up a little bit. So you'll have this this letter that you can either copy and email to people, paste it into an email, or print it out and send it in the mail to folks. But the memo is this: it just kind of introduces what is a goal, and then it explains how we write goals. And when we get into the PowerPoint, I'll talk about that more. And then it's asking them to do some pre-meeting tasks. So the pre-meeting tasks are these. We want them to see, here's where we break down the vision statement. We want them to review the third paragraph of the vision statement. That was where you described your ideal kids. And then we're going to ask them to print out a list of suggested program goals. Those are goals that we're going to suggest for you. And you don't have to use our goals. This is just another time-saving step. So you'll print out our suggested goals. And then we're asking them to do two things. One is to check the choices on our suggested goals, and because they believe the students should make that, because if they do make those choices, you are likely to move closer to the vision. And what I want you to see here is that our goals are connected to the vision. That we're saying, okay, if we want to get to this vision, and this is the ideal things, the ideal behaviors that we want to see out of kids, then what kind of choices do kids need to make? And those will become our program goals. So we're asking them to check any choice that they think is important for the students in your school to make. And then we're giving them a heads up that it's okay for them to check every single goal. You can't have too many of these goals in our model. We're going to narrow them down later. But right now, we want to identify every single choice that a successful student would tend to make. And then we also are saying it's okay to check none of the goals if they don't think any of them apply to your students. So the reason we say that is sometimes people start to think it's very common that people will check every single one of our suggested goals, and we don't want them to think that that's not okay. That's okay. And then, as a second step, we're asking them to identify 3 to 5 of those suggested goals or choices that they think that your school and community should address in a big way in the coming year. So they may have 40, 50 goals, but now we're saying, okay, of all those things, what do you think our school really, really needs to work on in order to move us to our vision? And then after doing that task, they bring that paper to your meeting with them. So we've done that. They've got some preliminary thinking going into your meeting. They've seen how they're going to start with the vision statement, then they're going to, just check off things, and then they're going to bring that list with them to the next meeting. Okay. Then I'm going to do that slide at the end. Okay, so I'm just going to pause and see if I've got any hands up, or if you have any questions, jump in here. I'm not seeing any hands about the pre-meeting mailing. Okay, so I want to show you real quickly what this list of suggested program goals looks like, just so you'll kind of have that on your radar. So I'm going to go to our manual, and I'm scrolling down now to the section that says goals, and here's our suggested goals, and here's what it looks like. So, and this is demo GAK school. It has 13 grade levels in it. So, one goal might be that all students choose to do their best at school. This is one that we're saying that might be a good goal for kindergartners, first graders, or second graders. All students plan to continue their education after high school. That we're thinking kids in 5th grade and up would start to think about what they're doing after high school. So they'll get the list that looks like this, and they'll just check the ones that they think are important. Of course, if you're high school, you're not going to get the K1, 2 ones. And if you're, if you're primary school, you're not going to get the upper grades. So, so that's what that looks like. Okay, so now let's do a walkthrough of the meeting, and then there's a lot of tasks to do after your meeting. So I'm going to actually, let's go back to the manual page, and you'll see here are the meeting handouts for the goals meeting. So cover page, the agenda, we didn't get that uploaded. I'll do that right after our meeting. And then the actual presentation. I have the presentation open, so I'll just come down here and I'll open that. Okay, so here is the presentation that you're doing with your council members. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the slides, and there's some of these slides are really key in terms of concepts that we're introducing. So I'll talk about that, and we want to make sure today that you understand some of these key things. And again, if you're fuzzy at all today, please ask me questions, because we really want to make sure that you're concrete with this before you're up trying to facilitate this meeting with your council. Oops, I think I have the wrong one open. Hang on here. Let me go back. Well, I thought I had it open. I don't. Let me open it. Okay, here we go. Slideshow from current slide. Okay. So in this first section, we're just doing a quick review, and then we're going over the agenda with your council. And these are the same slides that we used last month. You may decide it's not necessary to go over this again, but I think it's good at the beginning of each meeting just to touch on it. So here's the aim of what we're trying to do with Guiding All Kids. And then this slide, though, is really important. What we're trying to do is to increase the percentage of students who make sound choices in areas that impact these aims. These sound choices, those are your goals. So one key concept right now to understand is that goals are student choices. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get kids to make better choices, so those choices become the goals of our program, the choices that we're trying to impact. Okay, and then we're reminding people of the process where we started with looking at achievement, and I love it that most of you took your the achievement for your vision out of your school improvement plan. That was really good. And then we said, okay, what choices do kids need to make in order for us to get this achievement? That will become your goals. And then later we'll talk about what activities do we need to put in so that we can reach those goals, so that kids will make the choices that we want them to make. So when you're presenting this slide, I think the key thing is to again point out to people that student choices are goals. Since our whole program is about helping kids making better choices, that's what we want to measure. That's where our goals are kids making our targeted choices. Okay. So we're helping folks understand that we've made really quite a lot of progress so far. If you think about all the work you've done a ton of work. You've got an organizational structure in place, and from reading your reports and talking to you today, I think it really sounds like your structure is working. You've collected data, or you're still in the process, some of you, but you've got some data collected, and now you're starting to define your foundations. You've got your benefit statement in place. You've got your vision in place. Now we just need to figure out, where are we going? What are the goals? And then later we'll talk about why we're not reaching those goals, and then what we need to do is the final step in activities. So just a quick, we want your council to realize that, they're making progress. And sometimes this feels like overwhelming, and there's so much to do the first year as we're setting up these foundations that we just want people to feel like, oh man, this is really good. We're on step 3 and there's only 2 more steps left. So yeah. Okay, so now here's our agenda for today. So what we're going to do with your council is we're going to introduce what is a program goal. You've kind of given them a hint already because you've said that program goals are student choices. And then we want to define, how do we write a program goal? We want to make sure that the goal is written in a way that we know exactly what we want to impact, who we want to impact, and what we want them to do. And then we know where we're going, what our baseline data is, and what we want our target data to be. So we really want to define, how do you write a program goal? Then we're going to create program goals, and that's basically what choices do we want all of our kids to make. And then where do we have some guidance gaps? So we'll be able to look at in their reports. I'm thinking that's actually, I'm going to take that out of there. I'm sorry. We rearranged some of this year, and that's actually going to fall into the post-meeting stuff. So what choices do we want all students to make? And then I need to make myself a note so I can remember to bring that back up in the post-meeting gaps. Okay. Then we're going to ask the council to start prioritizing the goals. So they'll have this big list of goals. And then we're going to say, okay, which goals have we already given priority to because we're already addressing them? And I think this will be kind of pleasant because, the counselors are going to be able to say, we already do a ton of stuff. And, of these 30 goals, 30 choices that we want kids to make, we're already addressing 20 of them, or whatever that number needs to be. And it also will give the community members a chance to say, oh my gosh, our boys club addresses that goal. So it's not only the schools that are already doing this, but our boys club has given priority to that goal. So this is almost like curriculum mapping. We're trying to figure out what's already going on around these goals. And anything that is already being addressed, we're going to call a priority goal, because somebody must have said at one time, this is priority because we're spending time and energy on it. Okay, so we'll define your program goals, and then we're going to say, okay, what are the goals that we want to emphasize next year? And we would suggest that is 1, 2, or 3 goals. It's something that you're going to spend a lot of time and energy on, and you're going to bring that to every single student in the building so that every single student makes that choice. We think if you identify too many goals, it just spreads you too thin and you won't reach every kid. So when you're thinking about these focus goals, it really is every single student. So I'm going into a lot of detail here. When you go over this with your council, the main things we want them to know on this slide is that they're going to get an introduction, then they're going to create program goals, and then they're going to prioritize. Okay, so that's the agenda, and here's the intro. And I'm going to pause after the intro and ask for questions. So if there's anything in this section that you're fuzzy on, there's some really key concepts in here. I want to make sure that we answer questions before we go on. Okay, so the goals intro, we're reminding people that the whole mission of this initiative is to help kids make sound choices. So you've kind of talked about that in the intro, but we just want to come back to that right here. And then we're saying our program goals then are the choices that we want our students to make in order to move towards our mission or our vision. So their program goals are the choices that we want kids to make. So program goals are student choices. Program goals lead us to our vision. Those are the key 2 concepts there. And if there's anything that's fuzzy about this, we need to make sure that you guys are clear before we leave today. So program goals are student choices, and they're associated with the vision. Okay, so in other words, they're not just some random thing that we thought would be nice. We chose this because we think if kids make this choice, they're going to look like the kids that we described in our vision statement. Okay, so here are some examples. We want to increase the percentage of students who. Well, you can see we've grouped the goals into 3 different areas. When I'm talking with teachers or non-counselors, parents, or your council members, I like to say, it's like we have 3 subject areas in school counseling and in guidance. We want to help kids make good choices in social emotional areas, in academic areas, in career areas. So we can think about this, just like math has algebra and geometry, we can think about how in guidance we have social emotional, academic, and career. And then I would not read through all of these, but I would read through a couple. And I depending on what level you're at, if you're at an elementary school, you could, just select the elementary ones to read about, or vice versa. So it's to increase the percentage of students who report bullying, turn in their homework on time, identify career clusters of interest. So it's a choice that it's something, it's an activity or behavior that kids have chosen to do. Sometimes kids don't choose to do something because we don't give them an opportunity to, but we still want them to make that choice. So later when we get to activities, we'll talk about, okay, what opportunities do we need to give kids so they'll make that choice? But that's in a coming step. Okay, so that's a goal, examples of goals. And then when we're writing a goal, this is really key. And again, if you're fuzzy here, we want to make sure you're asking questions. We always write goals as is our goal to increase the percentage of, and then we put in a student group. So on this page, I've all of my students are just all students in the school. I'm going to increase the percentage of all students who, and then there's a verb, report, and then bullying. All students who use healthy methods to de-stress. All students who refrain from using drugs and alcohol. Who enroll in Algebra 1. Who participate in job shadowing. So all of your goals are going to have a student group, they're all going to have a verb, and they're all going to have a student choice. Now, the student group can change. It doesn't have to be all kids. So let me give you some examples of that. And here's a couple of examples. So let's say you're in a 5 through 8 building. Well, it wouldn't make sense for all students to enroll in Algebra 1 for the coming year. So it might be we want to increase the percentage of 8th graders who enroll in Algebra 1, or 8th graders who enroll in electives related to their career interests. Maybe there's at the elementary level, maybe there's a choice right now that you realize this is a choice you'd like your 3rd graders to make. And so, you'd say increase the percentage of 3rd graders who do whatever. And it may be that as you start to look at your data, you discover that it's not all students, because remember, all the data is disaggregated in our survey reports. So you may decide it's not all students who we need to focus on for this choice. It's just the boys. The girls are doing fine. So it would be to increase the percentage of boys who whatever. Or it might be to increase the percentage of free and reduced lunch students who choose to visit a college campus, because you've looked at your data and the paid lunch kids, for whatever reason, they're making campus visits. It's the lower income kids who aren't for some reason. So it's okay to narrow down your student group. It doesn't have to be all kids. When you enter into the computer, you can put in the student group that you'd like. Okay, I think I'm going to, one other idea, let me come back, is that your goals can also be sequential. And I'd really, in a district your size, this is pretty much an easy discussion to think about, do we want to have some sequential goals, so that it might be that, we want to increase the percentage of all 7th graders who can identify a career cluster of interest. And then we want to look at, okay, then in 8th grade, we want them to enroll in electives that match their career cluster of interest. And then in the 11th grade, we want kids to participate in job shadowing related to their career cluster of interest. So, in your discussions that are K-12, as you get together as counselors from different buildings, I'd really encourage you to think about how can we take our goals and organize them so that they're vertically aligned with each other, that they build from year to year with our students. And it may be too, like when we did this in my school, I was a high school counselor. I went back to the middle school and I met with the middle school counselor for lunch, and I said, it would really be helpful if kids made these choices before they got to high school, so then I could just take them where they were and roll. And so, some of these, like having kids participate in job shadowing and having identified a career cluster, I asked them, could you do this in middle school so when they get here I can build on that? So think about that too. In each of your buildings, what would you like the kids to have chosen to do? What choices would you have liked them to have made before they get to your building? That would be a really great, especially since I think you have 5 counselors in your district, to just maybe take a few hours and just have that discussion. How can you align your goals sequentially? So, okay. Then I'm going to stop right there and I'm just going to pause for a couple seconds and give you a chance to raise hands if there's any questions on what a goal is in GAK or how to write it. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, I'm going to go on. So then we're telling the council, looking forward, then we're going to prioritize our goals and we're going to kind of narrow them down. So we're going to have a lot of goals, all the choices we want kids to make. And then we're going to narrow it down to priority goals, which are the choices that we're working on right now. We already have programming in place to help kids make those choices. And the counselors big time, will participate in this discussion and say, yeah, we're already doing things to help kids make, choice number 3 and choice number 7. And your community organizations can do the same thing. And then you're telling folks, and then at the very end of today, we're going to talk about, okay, what are the small number of goals, 3 to 5, and even 1 is fine, that we want to focus on next year big time, because that goal is really key to our vision, and not enough kids are making that choice right now. So, okay. So, in giving folks a heads up, it's really uncomfortable for folks to have a lot of program goals. They're thinking, our high school counselors, when we first talk to them and they see our list of suggested goals, they'll see, oh my gosh, there's 67 of them. How am I ever going to help kids, make good choices in 67 different areas? So we want to explain that the reason we have that many goals is because as we've studied kids over the years, we've been doing this for 20 years, kids that are successful in school and high schools tend to make 67 different choices that are good choices. And you'll see what all those choices are when you open up our suggested goals. In middle schools, there's about 50 choices that we think kids need to make, and in elementary schools, about 29. So remember that you're not going to work on all of those choices all at once. It's perfectly okay to just work on one, but we want to define what they all are. And because as we build these programs, your teacher advisor program, your academic integration, your community-based guidance, they will all be coming to these goals to see, okay, which of these goals could we tackle? So it's really important to get them all identified. So, and again, you might say to your council, don't freak out that there's 67. That's okay. We're not going to do them all at once. We don't want people to feel overwhelmed. This can be very manageable. Okay. So this is some pushback we've heard that we wanted to share with you, and I think it might be okay to just say this with your council. Some people say it's unfair to expect all students to make sound choices because some students don't have the opportunities to make that choice. They can't take a career interest inventory because nobody's ever given them one or explained to them that they exist. So something to think about is that every time we lower our expectations, we've done them, in our opinion, a disservice. If we say, oh, well, they don't have access to a career interest inventory, so we're not going to, have it be our goal that they take one. We've just, lowered our expectations of what of the choices that student would make. So the question then is, collectively, we need to do what we need to do to help all students reach those expectations. And we're really trying to establish on your council an attitude of whatever it takes, no excuses. If we go, I'm going to go back to the screen. If we say there are 67 choices that successful kids make in school, and we really love kids. I mean, this whole thing is kind of driven by loving kids. We really love kids and we understand that there are 67 choices that they need to make. Then, is it not our obligation to give them what they need so that they can make those choices? Every single kid in the building, not just the kids whose, parents have been to college or who are, are brave enough to ask questions, but every kid in the building. So we're trying to establish here this culture of this is not just for some kids, it's for all kids, and that we have the obligation as adults, because we love the students in our community, to do what it takes so that they can make those 67 choices. So, kind of think about how to get that across, and, you don't want to sound too preachy. But on the other hand, if you don't have the commitment to doing whatever it takes to bring those 67 choices to all the kids, every time you pull back, you're making it impossible for students to make the choices that they need to make to be successful. So kind of think about that and how you want to introduce that to your council. Okay. And then this kind of goes with that idea that all means all. We're not talking about just the kids that are easy to reach. We're not talking about most. We're not just talking about the kids who are already engaged, but we're talking about going after kids, because 99.99% is not good enough. In our community, we want every single kid to be successful. Now, and again, for you, especially for the counselors, remember, this is not all on your shoulders. We're setting up the foundations for 5 different programs, not just the school counseling program. So, down the road, everybody will be working together across the community to help kids make those choices. Okay, and that, I kind of got ahead of myself. That's the next point, is that there are many programs that can help students reach these goals. It's not just school counseling. Okay, so now let's go to the task of identifying our goals. So the first of all is a large group activities. So we're in large group, we're looking at just reviewing with people from your vision what the core convictions were, what the ideal adults were like, and then specifically what are our ideal students like, and then what's our ideal achievement data. So you might pass out copies of your vision statement, and just tell people, since these goals are based on our vision, let's just really quickly skim over our vision and remember, what we did last month. Okay, and I put the screen up so that you could, write some ideas on it, or you could just pass out the copy of the vision statement. Okay, that's another. Okay, so now step 2 of this is an individual reflection, where you're asking people to get out their pre-meeting task, that paper that they brought with them, and to just review it. And they're looking through this, and for most of them, they have checked like every single one of those choices. They want kids to make those choices. They realize that those are good, healthy choices. And so now we're asking them to circle the choices that they did not think that students in your school need to make. So in my thinking is that they're going to have a very small number of circles circled, number of statements circled. So they may have 3 or 5 or none or 1. And then we're also asking them to write down any choices that maybe needed to be added, that they were not on the original list. So, and if your school's normal, they'll come up with a couple that, that ASA we just didn't think about, or maybe are pertinent to your community, but aren't, don't generalize across the state, across the country. So, so there's 2 tasks: circle any of the choices that they did not check because they did not feel that the kids in your building need to make those choices, and then add on any lists, any choices. Okay, so that's step 2. And then step 3 is to go to small group discussions, to just talk about, what did you circle as not being important, and then what choices need to be added. So we're talking in groups of, 2, 3, 4. And then you're coming back to the large group discussion, and we're talking here only about what do we need to add to the list. So now, here's a note to the steering team, just a reminder. As people are sharing things to add, you're going to add them to a poster that we're providing to you called an Instagraph. And the Instagraph, I'll show you in a minute. It's a tool that we use to come to consensus really quickly. So the instructions on the Instagraph, let me show you this is what they look like. So there's all the possible goals will be written, all the suggested goals will be written off to the side. And then we're asking them to put a sticky dot or an X to the right of any of those goals that they think should not be included in your program. Okay, so let me go back to the instructions. They'll be able to see that poster on the wall. So the instruction is place a sticky dot or an X next to the student choices that you do not feel are important for students in our school to make. Okay, so here's what will happen. So I like to take a little break at this point, and I'll say, we're going to take a little break, but during the break, come up and put your sticky dots on the poster. So the first person comes up, and I would have one of your steering team members kind of standing there to guide them. The first time they do this, they get kind of confused. So the first person comes up, and they say, well, there are 3 of these things that I didn't think really our kids needed to do these things. So they've got 3 sticky dots on here. Then the next person comes up, and they said, yeah, I had 3 too, and my first one is the same as the guy that was up here before me, so they put their dot to the right of that guy. See how that yellow dot on the top one on line 2 is to the right of that red dot. Then the next person comes up, they do the same thing. And the next person comes up and they do the same thing. And what we're starting to build here is a bar graph. So when we get to the discussion, this is really easy. We know that we don't have to talk about number 1, number 4, number 6 at all, because nobody thought those things should be excluded from your list. We don't have to discuss 3 or 9 because there's just one person. Probably number 2 is going to come out because everybody voted for that one as not being important. So this just really gets you to consensus quickly. It shows you how the whole group is thinking. It's also helpful because it helps folks to understand where your consensus is coming from, that it's not just, some person on the steering team that's saying, okay, this is what we decided, but it's the whole group that had input here. We love Instagraphs. We'll use them again and again and again. I think we're going to do 6 of them actually in this meeting. Okay, so that's your first Instagraph. Then this one I'm going to take off. You don't have the data to do that one yet. I'll remove that. So then, we're just checking with everybody. Can you live with these goals and support them publicly? And, once they've seen that Instagraph and they know why some things came off and why some things went on, they can say, yeah, we agree. Number 4 should have come off and number 1 should have stayed on. So also don't forget that on this Instagraph, you have written at the bottom of it anything that got added to the list. So if there's any goals that they said, yeah, we see that in our school, we want all students to whatever, and it's not on our list, ASA's list, then you would just write that at the bottom. And people could vote for that one too when they came up as needing to come off the list. It depends. Okay, so I'm going to then the consensus check. And before I go on, I want to pause here again and make sure you understand this is the first half of your meeting. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to start to narrow down our goals. And this is kind of going to be a discussion. If it's, well, let me move forward. So it's an individual reflection to begin with. And everybody's thinking about which goals are we currently addressing in our school or our community. And then if we are currently addressing some of these goals, what activities are we doing that address those goals? So the counselors are thinking, oh my gosh, we do 1 million activities to address those goals. And they're going through their list of goals in front of them. And, they're thinking, well, we do this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. So if you have time, the counselors could report out on that. Or you could say to folks, we'll come back to you later and explain at our next meeting and explain which of these goals we're already hitting as counselors. More important here is this is where we kind of do the curriculum mapping. So what's really important here is that, if there's a member of the Kiwanis Club there and they think, well, we talk to kids about the importance of doing homework, that, it's part of one of our activities, that they have a chance to speak up and say, yeah, we're hitting that goal. Or if the Boy Scouts, they have a merit badge on career development, so they could say, yeah, we have a career badge, and we right now there's only one kid in our troop that does it, but we could very easily have all the kids in our troop do it. So we're kind of looking at outside of the school counseling program, where are there some goals that are already being addressed. And it might be within your academic curriculum too. We find that there's in your health curriculum, there's a lot of social and emotional goals that are being hit. In some of the family and consumer science classes, there's a lot of career goals that are hit. So we're kind of doing some curriculum mapping in this section as well. So then we just come back to a large group discussion, and we're just asking folks what goals are we already addressing. And I would start out with not the counselors, because I think you're going to run out of time if you start with counselors. I would start with everybody else and just say, is your church hitting any of these, or is your service club or your place of employment, or where are you helping kids make these choices? And let everybody else talk first. And then if you have time, the counselors could say, we're doing, list your activities, or you could just say, we think we're addressing about 3/4 of these goals right now, and as we're entering this stuff into the system, we'll make sure that we include that. So okay, so that's priority goals, and again, I want to emphasize that this is a key concept. The difference between a goal and a priority goal is priority goals are things that you are already addressing. Somebody is already addressing. Okay, so those are priority goals. And now we're going to come back down to the focus goals. This is key. These are the things you're actually going to work on. Okay, so on focus goals, first of all, we're giving the definition. It's a small number of goals. It could even be one that we want to emphasize next year. And the question, though, before we can determine this, is how many goals can we handle? At this time, people are looking at the counselor thinking, could you handle like 12 more of those goals? And the counselors are thinking, I'm already overwhelmed. I can't do, 12 more. So we want to start looking before we decide what the focus goals should be. We want to look at capacity. And it's perfectly okay for the counselors to say, I can't do anymore. And through this discussion, we're going to come up with a plan for expanding your capacity so that we can address more focus goals. So there are 4 things that tend to limit a school's capacity to help kids make good choices. One is their personnel. We have, some elementary schools where the ratio is 1,000 students for every one counselor. We have some elementary or other schools too that have no counselors. So one thing that may be limiting your ability to help kids make choices, good choices, is your personnel. Another thing that may be limiting that choice, your ability to help kids make choices, is the way counselors are using their time. This is where your time use data is going to come in, and you'll be able to say to your counsel, I would love to be able to help kids make better choices, but I'm spending 85% of my time doing things that have nothing to do with guidance or counseling. And, just somebody has to do these things. Remember, we're going to come up with a capacity expansion plan. So we'll talk about maybe how to address that. It may be that the counselors need funding. They can't provide a learning styles assessment to every student because, they can't, I think there actually is a free one online, but if there weren't, they might have to purchase one. And then finally, another limiter might be that counselors don't know how to help students make this choice. And if that's the case, then the limiter is a lack of professional development. We often see that with middle school counselors who are, all of a sudden they're thinking about helping 8th graders understand, in a basic way, financial aid. And then we realize that the middle school counselors, that's something they need to learn. So they decide to go to the IECAC conference, even though that conference is designed for high school counselors mainly, because they want to learn about financial aid so that they can explain the basics of it to 8th graders and 8th grade parents. So there may be these limiters, and we want to look at each one. So the first one we're going to look at is personnel. And this you will have completed ahead of time. You're going to write down the counselor's name, what their FTE is on paper. So this is, this is whoever. This is Kim Bunn. She's a full-time FTE. But now on the time use reports from your time use logs, we know that Kim is not spending 100% of her time performing school counseling tasks. She's doing a lot of things that have nothing to do with guidance and counseling. In reality, she's only spending 75% of her time doing school counseling tasks. So we don't have a full-time FTE. We have a 0.75, a 3/4 time FTE. So all of this is calculated for you in the time task log. It's why we've been so adamant about you filling in every single block of time so that we could calculate this to help your community and your school understand that because of some choices that have been made, it may be taking your counselors away from being able to help kids make good choices. When we get to how do we expand our limitations, this may be a place where folks say, okay, what are those non-program tasks and how can we reassign them? Because if we reassigned all of Kim's activities, it would be like gaining a quarter-time counselor. And I'm just picking on Kim. I have no idea where her time on task percentages are. But this is why we've been doing that, so we can enter that into a discussion here to see, is this a limiter? Then the other thing we want to look at is just, our staffing ratios. So, except this time, we're not going to say that, for Kim that we have 450 students for a full-time counselor, what she is on paper. We're going to say that we have 150 students or 450 students for a 0.75 counselor, and then you'll do the math so that, the 450 so that this number ends up being 1, and then we increase this number to make it equivalent to the 450 to 0.75. So that's going to increase this number. So on paper it might look like Kim has 450 to 1, but then in reality, because Kim's not really a full-time counselor, it might be more like 600 to 1. in reality because of the way we're using her time. Okay, so again, and that's a place where if this gets confusing about how to make this adjustment or where to find the data, call Tina and we can help you look at that. And I'll help you look at that today too. Okay, does your school have a support person on staff? Is there a secretary? Yes or no? And then time use. This is another really cool activity. We're going to use Instagraphs here. And the first thing we want to do is an individual activity. And we're just asking people, we're saying we've talked about all these activities, types of activities. What in your, ideal, what percentage of time would counselors be spending in each of these activities? What percentage of time do you want them to spend in non-program tasks or in, behind the scenes management of their tasks or advocacy or counseling or guidance? So everybody's writing this down. Normally, people will put a 0% on non-program. 5 to 10% is very common on management, but everybody's doing this individually. Okay, so then we're asking people to take their individual percentages and to come up to the wall where there's these 5 different Instagraphs, and they go to the guidance Instagraph, and they said they want their counselors to spend 60% of their time providing guidance. They find the 60 column. This time we're going to build the bar vertically. So they'd put their first sticky dot here. The next person, if they're 60%, they'd put their sticky dot on top. And what you'll end up with is a bar graph. And at the top of each of the bar graphs, you'll estimate that, okay, for the group, at the top of that normal curve, that's the percentage of time that we want our counselors to spend on guidance. And it always works out that when you add up, if you go with the top of the normal curve, what you'll end up with is that on the 5 graphs, when you add those up, they'll come to 100%. Depending on how you rounded, that may add up to 99% or 101%. 102%, but if so, you can just kind of say, okay, group, where do we want to shave a little bit off of this? Which one do we want to shave a little bit off of? Because our time percentages have to add up to 100%. We can't ask counselors to work out, beyond their contract hours. So it's got to add up to 100%. So yeah, and this is really cool, and it's really going to be helpful because when we're talking about time use, this becomes such a visual of why do we need to get those non-program tasks away from the counselors. So, okay. So, on this next slide, you will, on the spot, type in what the desired percentages are that you came up with from the Instagraphs, and then you'll already have in here your actuals from your logs. And then you'll be able to say, our desired was 0% non-program. We're at 30%. Our counselors spend a third of their time doing things that have nothing to do with guidance and counseling. So, same thing. Don't be surprised right now because you're doing GAK. If your management actual is higher than a normal year because you're spending all this time collecting data and getting ready for council meetings, and that percentage after this year will go down drastically. But if it's high, you'll be able to explain to people, well, yeah, it's high this year because this year we're, really beefing up our management, and we're spending a lot of time on program design, and so our management is going to go up. So, okay, so that's counselor time use. And then finally, another possible limiter is funding. And you're just taking your total budget, excluding salaries and benefits for your counselors, and you're just dividing that, by the number of your students, so you can come up with your per pupil expenditure for guidance in your building. So if you don't have a budget, what you could do is estimate last year how much you spent. The other thing you could do is you could just say, we don't have a budget. And if it were me and my math department and my English department did have a budget, but I didn't, I would say, unlike the other departments in our school, our guidance department doesn't have a budget. We think it's a good idea for the counseling department to have a budget. That doesn't happen often, especially in elementary schools. It's just when you want to buy something, you have to go to your principal and ask, can I have this? So we think it's, fair, and maybe fair is not the right word, but just it's equitable that if we're giving the math department a budget, we also give the guidance department a budget. But think about how to present that. We don't want this to, you'll need to think about the politics in your building and how to best say that if you don't have a budget right now. Okay. And then finally, the possible limiter is professional development. I've listed here the kind of the more better attended national conferences and state conferences. You'll need to edit this sheet, and just to show people, how do you guys keep up to date in your school, or how do your counselors learn something, learn new things. If your counselors go to no professional development activities, that would not be uncommon. When I was at the Department of Ed, we did a major study on the professional development that Indiana counselors were able to do, and like 80% of the Indiana counselors never did any professional development, mainly because they couldn't get out of their buildings and there was no budget for them. So, and then the question is, how are your counselors going to keep up to date if they aren't able to go learn content, So anyway, so that's something to think about. And when we get then to the next step, all of this will be discussed. So you're presenting all these limiters to why you can't help kids make good choices, because we don't have enough money, we don't have enough staff, our counselors don't use their time, aren't able to use their time to be with kids. We don't have funding, and now we're coming up with an action plan. So again, depending on time, you might ask folks which of these is the most important, and then just spend time thinking about that one. Or if you have time, look at all four of them. For most schools, the most important one is time use. They realize, gosh, if we could get those non-program things away from the counselors, it'd be like adding a half-time counselor. So yeah, most schools don't talk about personnel because there's just not the funding possible. But occasionally a Kiwanis club will say, how much would that cost to hire another counselor? And they'll do fundraising and come up with the money for another counselor. So you just never know what this discussion is going to perk. And maybe, they're not raising enough money for a whole person, but, maybe they'll help raise money for supplies. Or materials, or they'll raise money to send the counselors to conferences for professional development. So you just never know what those community organizations are going to do. We always have surprises, big surprises in this area. So, okay. So now, then we want to say, given all these limiters and our expansion plan, are our counselors able to address focus goals next year? And if nobody, if your counselors are already overmaxed and nobody's going to help with this expansion plan, nobody comes up with any ideas, then you may have to say, we can't do anything more than what we're already doing. And what a shame that would be. That, remember, we're going after 100% of the kids. Something's got to give. It's probably, you're not going to win the lottery and have $1 million to hire a trillion counselors. It's probably going to be one of these other areas, specifically time use. So, but in most cases, people will feel, okay, let's do one focus goal, or let's do 2 or 3, and then it's just a discussion. Okay, which ones? If you that could just be a general discussion, but if you get bogged down with that discussion, you can go back to this Instagram, which is already on the wall. Where did it go? That one. You can go back to that Instagram and just say, okay, put little checks next to the possible goals that you would like to be our focus goals, and only pick, 3 things. and see if you have any consensus among the group, and they just make little X's out here in the margin. So if you want to, an activity, if the conversation gets bogged down and you're not getting to consensus, this would be just a real easy way to do that. Okay, I'm going to go back forward. Okay, then this is really important. This is the last step of this meeting. You're doing a capacity check, and we're just saying, given our limiters and given our expansion plan, do our counselors have the capacity for addressing both the priority goals that we're already doing and these focus goals that we're really going to beef up on next year? Do they have the capacity for doing that in the next year? Now, if as a counselor, if you're thinking that your council is expecting too much of you, this is your point where you have to speak up. You have to say, as much as I want to help the kids, and this breaks my heart to say this, but in reality, I don't think I can do 4 focus goals. As I look at the things I'm already doing, I think I can only do 2 focus goals next year. So, and then if that's the case, you got to go back and figure out which ones are going to come off. So counselors, we don't want to take you beyond your capacity to do things well. So this is really kind of a place where you have to speak up. The other thing to think about is that next year you're going to be accountable for those focus goals and making sure that the kids are making those choices. So we don't want to extend you to the point where you can't deliver. So you have to speak up if you're feeling overwhelmed here and you don't think you can do what the council has in mind. Okay. Okay. And then we're just talking about what's coming next. So you're just letting folks know that the counselors are going to do some follow-up. We're going to think about, are there any external goals from your central office that the council's not aware of, and the central office has said, you have to help have more kids take the FAFSA. That's a mandate from central office. You have to do that in high school. Then even if your council never brought that up, your boss is telling you have to do it, you got to do it. And then in the Indiana Department of Education has some requirements, like schools have to do bullying prevention. If that's happening through the counselors in your school, even if the council doesn't bring it up, you have to be compliant with what DOE says. So you have to put in a goal for that. These external goals are things that you're being compliant with. They're not things that you think are important. If you thought they were important, they would be in your goals already. But somebody outside your building has said this is important to them, and so you're just being compliant. Okay. And then I've listed central office and Indiana DOE, but there may be others that have expectations of you, and I'm thinking specifically if you've gotten a grant and the person that you got the grant from is expecting that goals be completed, reached, then you need to put those goals in as well. So anybody has any expectations of your department, of your school counseling program, you need to put those goals in there. That may mean that now you're overextended and you have to go back and take out some of those focus goals. So, so we want, in terms of the workload, we want it to push the counselors, but not kill them, not make them have to work evenings and weekends and, unless they want to. Okay. And then the other thing is that we're telling the council we're also going to check our student data from our survey. And there may be some goals that you picked that when we look at the student survey, the kids are already making those choices. So we might want to take some of our goals out because it's not a big deal for us. The kids are already making those choices. And as we look at that student data, there may be some areas where we thought kids were making those choices, but they're not. So we might want to, add some goals. So we're going to tweak our goals based on what the student data is telling us, and our counselors and our steering team will follow up with that after the meeting. So, okay. And then you're just letting folks know that you'll send them a draft list of the goals, and And then future meetings are being held, 2 meetings left, one in March, one in April. And that's it. Okay, so that's the meeting. I think you can see that it took me quite a long time to go through the meeting. It's going to take a full 2 hours, I think, to facilitate. You might want to break this into 2 meetings. We have a lot of schools that do that. So, just kind of think about that. If you do break it into 2 meetings, I would do all the goals in the first meeting and then the priority and focus goals in your second meeting. Okay, I'm going to pause and look for questions. And then I'm going to talk about the post-meeting tasks, and my goal is to be finished by 3:30. Okay, I'm not seeing questions. Okay, coming up to process goals, or the process page. And I'm going down the goals. Okay, so we have gotten through step 6, conduct the council meeting. I need to show you where to find reports and how to enter information. I think you'll be happy that we've made the data entry pretty simple. For example, when I enter program goals, I'm just going to go here. And what we've done is to save you time, we have given you a place where you can add suggested program goals. So I'm just going to click enter. And here are all of the suggested program goals. And if you wanted to add one, you would just click add. And then you would say which students you had this goal for. Is it all kids, or is it just females, or is it just paid lunch? So then on some of these goals, this school already has goals in, and so they're getting a warning that says that this goal is already in there. The student group is all students, so in all grades. So don't add this goal again if it's for all students. But you might be thinking, in addition to all students continuing to plan their education after high school, I want to close the gap here. I want to really focus on my low-income kids, and I'm going to look at free and reduced lunch. So I'm actually going to have this goal in twice, once for all students and once for free and reduced lunch students, so I can improve this percentage across the board, but start to close that gap, that guidance gap between my paid lunch kids and my free and reduced lunch kids. So as you look at the data reports, you'll see that data. It's very interesting where you have those gaps. Okay, then, so that's entering the goals. Oh, I forgot one part. Then there's this section here where you can create your own goal. If it's not on our list, really easy to do. I'm going to, the goal name is to, the choice is to participate in homework club. And I'm going to do this for my 3rd graders, or let's say 5th graders. It's not all students I'm selecting grade level, it's 5th graders, and it's either all students or it's just, maybe you're going to say, this is just for, again, for my free and reduced lunch kids, or whatever the group is, and then save the goal. So pretty easy. Now, a couple of things. If you don't like the way we have worded a program goal, you can change it, but to change it, you've got to enter it as one of the goals that you've created. Okay, so you can't like edit our language, but if you don't like it, just don't pick our goal and then create your own goal and word it the way you want it to be worded. Now, the downside of doing that is for all of our suggested program goals, every one of them, we have data from the survey. So if you don't want to have to collect your own data, if you want to use survey data, you've got to go with the wording that we've used, because that aligns with wording from the survey. Okay, then you can review your, yeah, so hopefully that made sense. But if you feel really strongly and you don't mind, collecting your own baseline data and follow-up data some other way, just go in and create your own program goal. Okay, then the rest of this is just, reviewing your list and then editing them. To edit your goals once they're in, you can see that when you add a goal, it's going to appear on this list. So this goal has a lot of goals in here. And you'll notice that all of these goals cannot be edited. They're all, these are not hot. And that's because this is one of our goals, and we don't want to change the wording of it because it aligns with the data. You can delete the goal and then create a goal. Any goal that you created, this edit button will be hot, and so you can go in and change the wording or change the student group or whatever. But for our goals, they cannot be edited. The language cannot be edited. Okay. And then we've given you just a note out here that this came from the suggested list. Okay, so that's entering the goals. I'm going to go back to, and then adding the external program goals. That link is going to actually take you back to the same place where we just were, so that we just want you to remember, oh yeah, I've got to add that program goal from DOE or from our central office or from this grant or whatever. Then to select your priority goals, this is going to take you like 2 minutes. You just click here. What shows up is all of your goals, and you're just going to check the ones that you're already addressing. So this school is already doing something to help kids turn their homework in on time, but they're not doing anything to help kids apply self-motivation skills. They're not doing anything to help kids improve their attendance. So anything that you're already doing, you just check off here. So counselors, if you don't have a chance to talk about all the things that you're doing because you're trying to save time in your meeting, this is where you'll indicate it. And then in your meeting, if anybody else at the Kiwanis Club said, yeah, we talk with kids in our programming about having 10 or few absences, you'd want to check that off because they're somebody's doing something to address that goal. Okay, so those are those, and then this is a step that actually I would really look at delegating steps in this month. After we have our priority goals in, then we want to enter knowledge statements for those goals. This is something that we're going to use later, and it will be really a key to your work. So I'm going to click on enter, and your priority goals now will pop up. And we're asking you, do students need to have specific knowledge to make this choice? And you may say, there is really no knowledge kids need. I'm going to say no. Or you may say, yeah, they need to understand what happens to their GPA, to their grade in a class if they have 1-0 because they didn't turn something in. And, if they turned it in and got a 50%, that would have impacted them a lot less than getting a 0. So we want to teach that. So yes, there is something the kids need to know. Kids need to know, and then you type that in, how much a 0 impacts their class average. And then if there's another thing they have to know. So later when we start to develop curriculum, this will become like your standards that your curriculum will be designed around. So when we're designing your activities will be designed to help kids gain this knowledge. So it's a really important step, and I would think through it carefully. So, okay, so those are your priority goals, knowledge statements. Then we're going to enter our focus goals, and again, that's really easy to do. So here's now all of our priority goals. We're just going to check the 1, 2, or 3 that you're really going to hit hard next year, and you get those in, so that takes a minute. So now we have our focus goals in, And now we want to start looking at data, because we think that your data is going to make you maybe think differently about what your goals need to be, your focus goals need to be. So the first thing we need to do is to edit the goals data summary. In here, and when you go to open this, we're crunching all of your survey data. So it takes a while for this report to open, and you can see it took that long. And also, the report, the way we're seeing it on my screen, is not as pretty as it's going to be on your screen, because I've got 13 grades in here, so you can see my grade level charts are off the record. So this first suggested goal is that kids will almost always turn their homework in on time. And you can see across the board, this is a real schools data, by the way, across the board, or I'm sorry, this is state level data, or I guess it's part of the state level data, because I think we surveyed like 50,000 kids last year. So there were 5,000 kids, and 4,500 of them said yes, that they almost always turn their homework in on time. So, and then we've got it disaggregated by grade level, so that you can look at that, and then you'll notice that for grades K1 and 2, we didn't ask this question on their survey, so it's saying that the N is less than 10. If you survey less than 10 kids in a school, in a grade level, you will not get survey data. It will say that it's less than 10. So some of this, you can see the question, apply for a merit-based scholarship, that's only on the senior survey. So, everybody else is less than 10. So, okay. These questions, if you don't have grade 12 in your school, this question would not appear on the report. It's only because our demo school has grades K through 12 that it's showing. Okay. So now you're looking through the data and you're thinking, oh my gosh, almost, turn in almost all their homework on time. 80% of the kids are already telling us that they're doing that. Maybe that's not so, maybe that's not so important for us to work on. And applying for merit-based scholarships, only 43% are saying that they do that. Maybe we need to spend more time on that. So this is something that as counselors and as a steering team, we really think you need to go through this data and let it influence how you think about your goals. Okay, so now let's say that when we're looking at this data, I know I'm going over a few minutes. I'm going to try to hurry through this, but this is kind of important. Let's say as you're looking at this data, you're thinking, I don't want to depend on a student perception. Are they turning in almost all their homework on time? I'm going to actually survey the teachers and ask them to name the kids that didn't turn in their homework today. And I'm going to get data a different way. So we've given you an option here, and I'm very proud of our system because it's so flexible. You don't have to use our survey data. Let's say you don't want to use our data, you want to use some other data source. So we give you the choice of using just another data source or using more than one data source. So using the survey and something else. Let's say I'm going to use, I want to look at the student survey data, but I also want to look at a teacher report. So I'm going to click more than one source of data. I'm going to click OK. And then again, we're crunching 1 million bits of data right now, so it's going to take a while, a few seconds for this report to pop up. Okay, and there it is. So now you see that goal is missing from our survey data tab. It's going to be over here on the multiple sources data tab. And here it is. So the multiple sources data tab is showing us the survey data. And now it's saying, okay, what else did you count? We counted the percentage of students who turned in all their homework on February 31st based on teacher input. And then we give you, the percentage, that you'll put over here, whatever that percentage was. And then when you're going to say, February, what do we say, February 31st, and then, switch the year out so that it's whatever the year is. Okay. And then, you'll save that. Okay. So now, let's say later you get in here and you think, you know what, I don't even want to think about this student data because it's, it's so inaccurate or whatever. You can tell the computer, I've changed my mind. I only want to use this data source. So if you click that, it's going to, I'm going to say I'm only using other data, saying okay. And now it's crunching all that data, so it's going to take a minute. It'll take it off of the tab where we're at from multiple sources, and now it's going to be just on the current data from other sources. So, so all of your data, the possible goals will be in one of these three places, depending on if you added additional data sources besides ours. Okay, so yeah, and again, when you get into that, if it's confusing the first time, call us and we'll walk through it with you. Okay, I'm going to go back to the vision to action. Okay, so here I am. I just did the, I just updated the report. The last thing to do is now we want to put in, now that we know what data fields we're using, we want to put in targets. We've got our baseline data. We want to put our targets in. So I'm going to click on enter. And this school, this school has some multiple source targets. It doesn't have any that are just the source outside of us, and it has some targets that are just schools. So here is their focus goal. They want to increase the percentage of students who submit a FAFSA. The student group is here. They're looking at all students. And here's the actual data from the survey. And now they're going to put a target in. So they're going to say, we want to increase from 58% to 70%. When do we want to do that by? Spring of 2019. That would be kind of quick. It's probably going to be spring 2020. And then we want to put another target in. We're going to say we want that number to be 80% by spring of 2021. So we want these targets to stretch you, but not be impossible. And we're only putting targets in for the small number of focus goals. And the expectation will be that whatever that target is, that you hit it. So we don't want you to have too many focus goals that you can't reach your targets, because you're spread too thin. Nor do we want the target to be a number that's so pie in the sky that even if you worked your tail off, you're never going to get to it. And we don't want this number to be so easy. Like in my first target, if I made this be, 59%, I mean, you really don't have to do anything, except a little tiny effort. So we want this number to be carefully selected so that it pushes you, but it's reachable if you work your tail off. Okay? Okay, that's it. That was a lot to cover today. Telling me that I haven't saved. I'm just going to go back in most recent tab, and I go back to the goal section, and the rest of this is stuff you've done before, putting the photo in Instagram, putting your minutes for this meeting in, and then reviewing the rubric items. Make sure you do that. So I think the most important thing to realize is that this is a big month. You've got to get that everything set up so that you can have your meeting. It's a technical meeting this time. You're really going to have to pay attention to the clock. There's a pre-meeting task to get done that you're going to have to send that out. So I really suggest that you sit down with your steering team and you talk about how are we going to get this meeting covered, and think about right away, how do we have that meeting? Do we need 2 meetings? Are we, what kind of timeline are we going to follow in this meeting so that we get everything finished? And then with your steering team, I would look at delegating the tasks for the rest of this. That somebody says, okay, I'll get the program goals and the priority goals and the focus goals. I'll take care of that data entry, but can somebody else write the knowledge statements? Can somebody else, get input from us, but set the targets? So to kind of delegate the things that happen after the meeting. So this is a big month. So again, delegate. And the other thing that Tina wanted me to share with you is to make sure that you do things in order. That if you get down to enter your focus data targets and you don't have your focus goals entered yet, that doesn't work. So everything in here needs to be done in the order that is where it's listed. I think that's it. And again, I apologize for taking you over. I know this is a long time to be on a webinar. We always debate whether it would make more sense to bring everybody to Indianapolis and do a workshop, but I know schools hate to have the travel time. So we might have spent a long time on the webinar, but we saved a whole lot of time in the car. So, okay, let's open up for questions, and then we'll close. So I'm not seeing any hands up. Okay. The one favor that I would ask is that as you go to do this work, if it feels fuzzy, because I'm going to ask 2 things. One is that if it feels fuzzy, call us, because we know that this is going to be hard to do if it's not crystal clear to you. And then the other favor I have to ask is that you really sit down with your steering team ASAP, like right now or tomorrow, and work out a timeline for this month. You need to make sure that you're having time after your meeting to get all these other post-meeting tasks completed in. And that last slide on the, let's see, it was on this one. The last slide on this one. Nope. The last slide that will go up on your steering team slides is the post-meeting tasks. Yeah. So any rate, I can't find it right now, but the last slide, it lists all the post-meeting tasks, but you also know it because they're all listed there on the process page. So, okay, call, please, if you have questions. And I'm really excited. You guys have done such a good job. I mean, you really have on the work so far, on the organizational structure and getting your data together, and having that vision discussion with your council. But this is a little bit more technical discussion. I think we've given you the right tools so that you can, it'll go smoothly for you. But it's just a little bit different than last month's meeting. So, okay, that sounds good. I'll let you go. And again, please call Tina if you get stuck. Thanks, everyone.